Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Inky Thoughts podcast. Today, I have a very exciting guest on here because we're going to be talking about a thing that's growing quite exponentially these last few years in the tattoo environment and space, so to speak, the tattoo world, one might actually be tempted to say, which is apps for all sorts of things, mainly for the what I would call the tattoo experience itself and sort of streamlining that. We'll get into detail about that in a bit. But other than that, which fascinates the sociology part of me way more, my guest also has been quoted by Inc. magazine as talking about this blurring of the lines between what you could call high or lowbrow art and how, which I firmly agree with actually, but we'll get more into that. Tattoos can sort of be part of blurring these lines and often can be considered art to a much greater extent than some art elitists, I would call it, for lack of a better term, might be willing to admit to. But without me butchering her words or paraphrasing her in a bad way, I would throw it to you, Laura, to introduce yourself.
Hi, great to be here. I'm Laura. I'm the founder and CEO of Tattd, which is a booking platform for clients to find their perfect tattoo artist, where you can discover, book, and pay in the app. And doing exactly what you just said, really bringing a lot of innovation to the industry. My background is actually the tech side. I think a lot of people, see the amount of tattoos I have and think that I'm a tattooer, which I have gotten way in depth with it and talked to a gazillion tattooers. So I feel like at some point I should try my hand at it. But actually, my background is starting tech companies and building apps for a living. And then separately, I studied art history at NYU in New York City.
Oh.
So Tattoo is really a beautiful culmination of my obsession with the tattoo industry, my love and sort of background knowledge of the art world, and also my expertise in tech.
It's quite funny. I've actually had a very famous art historian on here already. A somewhat good friend of mine, the historian Matt Lotter, who teaches at the University of Essex in the UK.
Very cool. I
And
love it.
not
Okay, I'll
only
watch that episode.
is he heavily tattooed, even in the face, uh, small ones, but he does have some face tattoos. I do know other academics that
Mhm.
are very heavily tattooed in the face, actually, but that's a different story. But he's funny enough also an art historian and quite the expert on tattoo history through that sort of
Mhm.
vein of historical research. Whereas
Yeah,
myself, I'm a bit more
absolutely.
current date. I don't deal much in history, only as much as to create context for what I want to talk about. But I mean, it
Makes
pays to
sense.
know some history.
No, totally. And there's a lot of history to tattooing as well. So you can get really
Absolutely.
in depth there.
That's also why that's also where you could say the sort of best argument sometimes comes for why tattooing is art to some
Mhm.
extent. Because I think
Yeah.
reading through some quotes you had up on Tattd and other places you've been talking to other people about that I read one where you talked about how you also had a pet peeve of mine as well, where people often think tattoos are about being badass and sort of rough around the edges and all that.
Yeah.
And I get why people get that misconception because certain people were very way louder in past decades about being tattooed than others were. But
Right.
when you look at it through history, and as Matt Lotter, the historian, talked about, has also talked about both my podcast and other places, it was never actually just a rough crowd or criminals or any people like that, the classical
Mhm.
categories that got tattoos. It was
Mhm.
always a more diverse group of people than that got tattoos as well. So
Right.
I love that idea because it is at least in a Western context, way more about art and self-expression, especially today.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it took like an interesting turn, right? So, like, the very beginning of tattoos were in indigenous cultures and a
Mm.
lot of times were used for healing and also decorative purposes, right? But definitely not thought of as, like, again, the criminals and the outliers are the ones that get them. Obviously, modern culture sort of changed that. And then if you put a culture sort of into that corner, then it's going to I guess look like that, right? You know what I mean? Like, if it's not going to be legal in a lot of places, or if people aren't going to be hired if they have tattoos or
Mm.
whatever it is, then it is going to sort of stay in that world. I think the more mainstream it's become, almost the more it's been able to develop its artistic kind of authenticity,
Yeah.
right? So it's not just the people that are banging out tattoos, like, in the dark alleys at the bars or whatever. These are proper trained artists that went to art school, that are also painters. And that's kind of what we're trying to continue to highlight. I think in my opinion, it's, pretty obvious whenever you look at the development of all these different styles, like the development of realism, and all these other tattoo styles that kind of mirror methods of traditional art. traditional art, or other fine art forms, you can kind of see how it is absolutely moving in that direction. But that is a lot of Tatted's mission also. It's sort of like, let's bring this industry up to the mainstream and sort of what it deserves, give it the respect it deserves.
I do think that at least in the art space, there is. It's the same way I feel about graffiti and street murals and stuff like that. That
Yeah,
oftentimes this is absolutely real art, but certain more, yeah, again, for the lack of a better term, elitist circles would not like to recognize as
yeah,
that. And I think that's more of a class divide than anything
yeah,
else. It's more often to do with people not wanting to merge their upper
yeah,
class cultures with anybody from a lower standing, often, which is a weird thing because as much art history can teach us, actually, talking from Mandela's perspective, for example, the elite have always been getting tattooed.
oh, no kidding.
Even back to before the especially before the invention of the electrical tattoo machine in
Huh.
1891, something around there. It was mostly only the elite, and then some sailors that got it for free when they went and visited
Uh-huh.
indigenous tribes
Uh-huh.
that got tattooed because it
Huh.
was quite expensive to get done. It
That makes
required a lot of
sense.
effort, even without, because tattooing was actually around in Europe even before James Cook brought
Uh-huh.
it back from Polynesia, which is not true. He just discovered another form of tattooing there, really, because it was already in Europe. But it was actually a
Right.
lot of elites got it. A lot of royal families around the world, a lot of noble lineages, all that sort of stuff. So it's always, and
Right.
that's the other thing. Even since you talked about how it's people that went to art school and that today that do tattooing. I mean, again, not everyone, but there are a lot more of that. But even some of the old time greats did that.
Mm.
And I can't remember. I'm bad with names, so I can't tell you a lot of examples here. And I probably
Yeah.
remember wrong. And if I do, and Matt sees this, do send me a strongly worded email correcting me. But I think even Donald Hardy actually went to art school before he became a tattoo artist. And he's also
Wow.
taught classes later on. I know, I can't remember any names of the fucking institutions in California, but there was a university where I went and later on as well taught some art classes after he cut back on
Mm.
tattooing as well a little bit. But that's the thing. Matt really pointed out in some of his writings and works that it's never
Mm.
been just the bikers or the rough guys, and that
Right.
even in those periods where they were really prominent, that's sort of like a fabrication to some extent. But that's just because they were the most visible in the public eye. So
Right.
we got this misconception that it was for the outsiders and those on the margins of society, and it has been in some cases. And some cultures have
Mm-hmm.
outlawed them that, but at least in a Western
Mm-hmm.
context, it was also always the creatives and some of the uptight
Yeah.
Wall Street types that when they throw off the button-up shirt, they would have tattoos
Yeah.
on their arms and that. And you might actually love this. Uh, I hope I remember the right year, but I think it was in 1905 or six. There was actually an article in Esquire magazine where they said
Uh-huh.
that the latest trend for the middle class and upper class lady was to get a few tattoos so she wouldn't be so stale and that. So it's been going on
Oh
for a
my
while, this
gosh.
idea that it's no
Wow.
longer for the rough crowd and the prostitutes and
Yeah.
the sailors and the soldiers and that. And that's Matt's personal pet peeve, so we're not going to get into that in this episode, but he hates when people to this day repeat that it's no longer for just the sailors and prostitutes and criminals, because it's not been for fucking 200, 250 years.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But
No, but you're right. I totally agree that the artistry has always been there,
yeah.
right? But it's just sort of what the mainstream eye
Oh,
focuses
yeah,
on. I think is
absolutely.
what's changing.
Absolutely, but that's also
Yeah,
because it's becoming way more. The capabilities we have today is also becoming so great that you can
yeah,
create virtually anything in a tattoo nowadays. I
absolutely.
hesitate to say that though, because some people might listen to this and then go out and ask for something absolutely unreasonable from a tattoo artist. But within reason, ironically, you can create some quite amazing things today
Yeah,
within the realm of
absolutely.
tattooing. And they keep, I think the new generations especially sometimes keep pushing the boundaries of what can be done. Like every new round of tattoo artists we get show us new stuff that can be
Mm-hmm.
created, and I love the growing diversity as well. Which I also noticed, which I
Mm-hmm.
gotta applaud you for with the app. That you, I know you don't have that function yet, at least not when the quote was I read was, but I love that you also want to make it so that people can find people they resonate with. Like if you're in the queer
Yeah,
community, you can find some queer tattoo artists, or at least a queer friendly tattoo artist. If you're of black or other kind of darker skin tones, you can find artists that know how
yeah.
to work those skin tones to that, because there's a lot of problems with that at times.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I do think getting a tattoo is a super personal experience. You know,
Yeah.
you really have to trust your artist. it's really intense. It's very psychosomatic. You're going through pain with this person. You want their art on your body forever, right? It gets, really personal. And I think a lot of artists speak about that and really respect that part of the process.
Oh, absolutely.
Given that, that said, the other aspects of a tattooer, I think, are really important. So it's not only like they have a fantastic style, it's like, I feel safe in this person's space if I am a minority, right? Or like an underrepresented group, right, to the LGBTQ community, or a person of color, or especially like with the people with different skin tones, having a tattooer that has experience with that is something that's super important. Absolutely. And not every tattooer trains themselves in that, which is a problem. So something else we're trying to work with. But even like we're finding like another double click, it's like, what about tattooers that have expertise in cover up, or expertise in mastectomy tattoos, or scarred skin is different. Like all of those different nuances, like you really need to know to find that exact right person
and that can
for
be
you. And that's
at least if you're new to it, it can be very difficult to research and know how who's good at that. Because you develop a discerning eye when you get into it, and then you get to know and learn, okay, she's good at doing this, and he's great at doing that, and they're good at doing this thing. But when you're new to it, which is why I think some of these apps that are more thought through, because there are a few apps coming out by now from different companies, and some of the more well thought out ones take this into account, the sort of, for lack of a better term, skill level of the collector. the experience is a way better term. Man, you can really tell it's my second language at times. But this sort of experience of the collectors taking into time into consideration as well. And that's the other thing that I liked about your app, and I might be heavily biased here, but your app does seem a bit more pointed towards people that are more serious about getting into tattoos and want something more personal, whereas other apps, I'm not going to call out any names because I don't want to burn any bridges or anything, they seem more like towards the general consumer, like maybe also people that just want to get one or two tattoos and that's all they're ever going to get, and they just want the same thing their mother's friend got when they saw in the hair salon and that sort of stuff, and that's fine. Not everybody's tattoo journey is the same, but I was pleased to see when I looked through and researched for this, how your app, of course, also allows for that, but it seems more geared towards people that really want to like dip more than their toe in when they start.
Yeah. You really hit the nail on the head there. And now I'll refrain from getting too like tech geeky on you, but
thank you, because I'm not.
I'll try. I love it though. So whenever you're building a product, I mean, this is any product. Whenever you're like starting a lotion company, like I don't care, whatever, any type of product or company, you have to be really, really hyper focused on who is the person that I'm building this for, right? And it's not just people with tattoos or people that want a tattoo. Like that's way too broad. So we sat there and we were like, okay, so how are we defining these people when we first started Tattd? And it was like, okay, it's like there's the newbie. There's a person that like either has zero or maybe one tiny tattoo. It's not like they live in a world where all their friends are super tattooed and they're really comfortable and they understand the process. That's like the new person. There's this like middle tier person that has like maybe one big piece, but they're, not fully immersed, right? No. You know what I mean? Their whole Instagram feed, like mine, isn't like all tattooing. And then there's like the expert that like travels for their tattoos and goes to the conventions and like all that other stuff, right? To build the product and also to market the product, we can't hit all of those yet. Now, eventually I want to open up different features for, I guess like the first and the last one, but we're really focused on this middle one because first of all, for the newer person, we don't have to get over the hump of let's make sure you're not scared to get a big piece. You know what I mean? Or like the education of how it goes. So we don't have to worry about that, right? They're already pretty sure that they want to be a tattooed human in life. You know what I mean? And we don't have to like do really advanced features for the person that's like a super expert. So sitting here in the middle, it's like, you already know like generally that you have to pick an artist by the tattoo style. So this is for someone that like has at least that baseline understanding. And that way they can be like, oh, great. Now I can just refine my search and find the artist that I want easier. Just because I don't know like how your life is, but if I have a tattoo idea, I am like, it is like burning until I get it. Like, I'm like, I want this now. Like I'm ready to do it. So, it's just like,
I'll say certain circumstances have made me rather have to plan a long list of stuff I want to get done, and artists I may want to get it done by than sadly being capable of getting them. but I do know
Yeah.
how you feel.
Yeah, exactly. But that's whenever Tattd started, it was kind of exactly that. So I was getting my first big piece that I wanted to find a very specific artist for. And I couldn't, it was taking me months and months of research. For whatever reason, I didn't have any friends that had tattoos. Like none of my friends had one tattoo, but I was just super into it. So I didn't really have any resources. Like I didn't know where to go. I didn't know who to ask. So I had to do this all alone. And I was just like Googling and I was like, this is insane. Like that makes no sense. So that truly is the inspiration for Tattd is making that process a lot easier for clients, and then doing a lot more that I think just doesn't exist in the industry, right? So like through Tattd, our artists have access to health insurance. You know what I
Wow,
mean?
that
Like
is
there's
actually
really
quite
no other
something.
process.
I mean,
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
know
So
that speaks more to an American crowd, but that is
yeah,
quite important over there. There's,
yeah, a little bit.
I mean, that is quite something to be honest. I mean, you do sort of learn about the American scene quite a lot, being if you immerse yourself even a little bit into the tattoo world. So
Totally, totally.
the
It's
impact of that
unfortunate.
can't really be understated. Helping with health insurance, to be honest.
Truly,
But
truly, truly. There's not a lot that can help freelancers, more or
no,
less. And like these tattooers have to figure out how to become one person businesses and have insurance, business insurance, and have health insurance. And okay, now I have to market myself and, all of this stuff. And especially as a tattooer, let's say you want to get a line of credit, or you want to prove your income to buy a house. Like all of these are services that we're opening up to support the tattoo world. So,
nice.
we are hyper focused both on the client side and on the artist side because we really want to serve both.
It does seem very much. That's also the other interesting bit because of course I've seen other apps that try to hit both as well, but I do like
Mhm.
how yours seem to be geared towards trying to, how do I explain this? uh, help market more than
Yeah,
you, for example, do on Instagram, because there's
yeah.
Instagram is both oversaturated, but also
Mhm.
there's the whole thing with the algorithm that sort of pushes back and forth on
Yeah,
how you advertise yourself. Whereas at least
right.
in your case, and certain other apps I've seen getting developed out there, it
Yeah,
returns more to the whole thing of like, here's a profile of the artist, you can read about them if you want, but here's all their
yeah,
work you can see, so you can also judge how is their skill really, and can they do what you
totally.
have in mind? Do you have the price? I mean, it's good to have marketplaces like that, sort of more focused on that, so you can know. It
Absolutely,
also
absolutely.
removes some of the awkwardness I would imagine you sometimes run into when you want to book a session, because I mean, I've had plenty of tattoos done by several different artists by now. It is still fucking difficult sometimes to ask the question, so how much is this gonna be? Because sometimes you don't know.
Totally.
Sometimes they're very open about their rates and that, and very clear about it.
Mhm.
Other times you don't know, because you might know them personally, you might not know them personally, so
Right,
you have no idea.
totally.
But if you have something like
So
that
the
where
back
where
and
it's more
forth,
direct, oh sorry about that,
yeah.
Laura.
No, 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 no. Go ahead. No, no. No. It's exactly that. No, you're like spot on with the back and forth exists both on the client and the artist side, right?
Yeah.
And so just because there's no data transparency of like, I specialize in this tattoo style, this is the price range, books are open or closed or whatever. Clients are going and like having to DM dozens of artists before they find someone that's right. And at the same time, on the artist side, they're getting 100 client requests for 5 to book, right?
Yeah.
So it's a problem for both sides of it. So that's absolutely what the search function is made for. It's really to make that process simpler, where as a client you're sitting there and you're like, okay, I can afford that, can't afford that, or like, let me make sure I'm only looking at artists that are specializing in black and gray. Fantastic, that's easier. We're even coming out with a function that we're calling mood boards, which is more or less like
Oh.
a little card that has your tattoo idea. It has all your
Ah.
inspo images, that has a quick description. That way, with one click, you send your tattoo idea to an artist with all the
Ah.
information they need to know. And it's like a 30-second quoting process and not all the communication back and forth.
That was pretty cool. It's sort of Pinterest in a way, but a bit more streamlined for the purpose, you could say.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And right now you can just search inspo on the app too. If you just want to like,
Okay.
check and save some images and you kind of like try to figure out your idea. We want to get really advanced with it, which is a very expensive tech build, but
I would imagine.
where like if well, I'm really excited about like the generative AI space. Again, I'll try to not get too technical, but we've already actually created the infrastructure to begin building, which takes a long time, but to begin building the concept where you'll be able to speak into existence a tattoo idea. So let's say I'm like, I want a butterfly in a watercolor style that's about this big or whatever, or that's more vibrant color or whatever else. You can play with it and then reverse image search that to a tattoo artist portfolio to have like the
Oh,
most
right.
exact match
That's quite cool
possible.
because what I would fear
Yeah.
whenever I hear people talk to two art and AI, I always fear that it's going to be a lot of people that go in and then they get an AI image created and then insist on getting that done by a tattoo artist and ignoring their style. I like your
Yeah.
idea a lot more where it's rather that an AI might be able to figure out a tattoo artist that fits
Yeah.
those criteria well. Because that still keeps their
Absolutely.
style alive and it still creates a more unique tattoo as well
100%.
in a way. Like that's pretty
A
cool.
100%. Yeah. And, you know, I do want to educate the client a lot also
Yeah.
on the fact that, like, you know, I guess the norms of the industry that like some people
Yeah.
don't know. You know what I mean? Like, you're respect the tour artist style. You know what I mean? Don't ask them to do something completely like out of the box of what they currently do. You know what I mean? Like, you can ask for some revisions whenever you sit down, you have the sketch, but like, don't ask for a million fucking revisions. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you clearly didn't communicate well, you know, like stuff like that. Like, you don't know that until, or like, it's a little bit like not kosher unless you absolutely have to send inspo images that aren't from the tattoo artist or portfolio. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Like, information like that is not readily available on the internet. So you learn that the hard way. So I really also, with all of our education, I'm hoping that I'm bringing tattooers clients that they're going to have a better experience with and a more fluid, more positive relationship.
I hope so too. I mean, I would also like to, both as a collector myself, but also as a sociologist, that I know there are a lot of good apples out there, I would like to say
Mm,
nowadays, but I would still love to educate tattoo artists sometimes on social graces and how to run a service industry at times. Because there's still
yeah,
people, even with the best intentions, that sometimes get their feelings caught up in how a client might fumble the ball, so to speak. Because it
yeah,
is a nerve-wracking thing, especially if it's the first time getting a
yeah,
tattoo. And then
yeah,
some artists get quite annoyed about that, or they can really, get agitated with for example, getting 20 nervous emails about, oh, how is this going to turn out, and are you able to do
totally.
this or that? You know, so it's a bit of a back and forth. But I think sort of creating this app space with a more clear communication can go a long way to resolve some of this.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. We really want to educate our, like you said, educate our artists also on, yeah, like what are the expectations and, you know, for at least for the artists on our platform, what do we want and expect from them and how they engage with clients. The other side is that for me, I am not interested in sitting here and policing artist behavior.
No, no.
But instead, we're creating mechanisms for the community to do that. So like our
Yeah,
ratings and like there's no transparency to like ratings and review systems. So like, you know, all that essentially exists is like Instagram stories. Like, let's say, for example, someone turns someone away because they're queer.
yeah,
There's no authority that can go in and be like, your license is being taken away. Like, no, that person just exists and continues tattooing and continues to
yeah,
discriminate against minorities, and it's really shitty.
yeah,
You know, so and people, you know, all that happens is essentially maybe one or two, you know, social media posts about it to like maybe try to
yeah.
cancel the person, which like isn't that effective, you know?
No, no,
So
no.
within the app, and ideally if we have a really fantastic community and we really make a lot of ground in getting as many people on board as possible, you'll be able to see all
Mm.
these tattooers and honestly the people that are up to that bullshit and that shouldn't be, you know, here touching the community and you know, putting their kind of like darkness into the community will be slowly siphoned out as people like continue to rate and review them and say, and you know, if you search tattooer's profile and their reviews are like such an asshole, you know what I mean? Like, turned me away, like, you know, charged me double, turned me
Right,
away, hit on me because I'm a female, like, whatever,
right.
you know what I mean? Then they'll be like, oh, I'm not going to book with them. So I am creating a mechanism for the community to kind of be able to police itself a little bit more effectively.
Yeah.
That way I don't have to come in and be that person.
That is also good because often pockets form within a community where people will go to people they vibe with, and some people are not, you know, they shouldn't be tattooing certain people because they might not be at all equipped to handle anyone that's not within their own group. But if they can tattoo
Yeah.
others and they're open about it, like I spoke with a tattoo artist from England about this, that we both talked about
Mm,
how, hey, if you don't want to be a safe base kind of tattooer, then just say it with your chest, but be open about it so you don't risk
yeah.
somebody coming in that can't handle that sort of rougher
Yeah.
tattoo place coming in and getting scarred for life because they can't tell from your Instagram or they can't tell from your fucking shop
Yeah.
that you're gonna behave like that. Instead, just be open,
Yeah.
as they say it with your chest, and just be like, "Hey, this is an old school biker shop. Cool, then do that.
Totally.
You know, you
Totally.
do that, but don't complain
Go
about
for
if you
it.
can't get enough clients then because the bikers aren't
Yep.
coming by then, you know?
Absolutely. And honestly, like to all those other, you do you know what I mean? You have
Yeah.
your personal brand. Like I'm not here to tell you like that's good, that's bad. But the only thing I will say is that for my company and for
Yeah.
people that I want on my app and that I feel confident sending clients to, it will only be people that can open safe spaces.
Yeah.
Like, and that's just gonna be my
But
brand.
that's
And
only
like,
good. That's fine
does
to be
that be
open about
everyone?
because that's also what I've liked about your app idea so far. That it doesn't seem like it's ever this over-ambitious thing where it wants to have every tattooer in America, for example, on the
Right.
app. It seems way more like you're creating an open online community and marketplace where people that are like-minded can go and use that to make their process more convenient.
Yeah,
You know?
absolutely. And we really have to look towards the future too, just because when you think about younger generations and Gen Z,
Yeah.
they're really pushing forward a lot of social
Oh yeah.
impact and, have values that I think are different than maybe older generations have. And that kind of is relevant to the tattoo community too. So,
Absolutely.
when I think about what I'm not building it to the people that are about to age out of the tattoo industry that are those rough biker gang people. I'm building it for the future of the tattoo
Mm.
community and what I think like the world and that community will
Well,
continue to become.
it's sort of what I do with this podcast as well. I very much try to promote the diversity of the tattoo world as well, and why that's a good thing that it's
Mm-hmm.
more that it's diverse and becoming more
Yeah.
diverse. I even
Yeah.
just I can say this episode because it might be out by the time this comes out, but I even wrote an article for Ink that I'm hoping they're going to publish about the next generation. It was way too broad a topic, but hopefully I did an okay job with it because there's a lot of different subtopics. But one of them is also
Cool.
about this whole thing with the next generation of tattooers, like people 35 and
Mm-hmm.
younger, especially are very
Mm-hmm.
much,
Mm-hmm.
wanting to create a tattoo environment that is more open, more diverse, and way more accepting and welcoming of
Yeah.
different people and different experiences and different identities and that, which I think is great because
Absolutely.
that creates more innovation, creates
Yeah.
more comfortability. And when you're comfortable and innovating, that's when you create really amazing new ideas and move the whole industry to a new point, I think. Like at least that's
Absolutely.
how when you look back at it from any social scientist, I would say when you look back in time, that's always when we've, evolved as a
Yeah.
society rather than as
Yeah.
saying a species. That sounds a bit too biology like.
I
We've
hear
always
you.
evolved in different societies most when we leave space for innovation. The best way to do that is
Yeah.
by accepting diversity. And
Yeah.
other industries is doing that more and more. I mean, it's becoming its whole own industry now, having
Yeah.
people coming in consulting on diversity and
Mm-hmm.
inclusion in
Mm-hmm.
companies and to
Yeah.
help them embrace this better.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you think about the growth of the tattoo industry, it would have to correspond with greater
Oh,
inclusivity,
absolutely, absolutely.
of every group and also of every, tattooed personality, if you will, right? So,
Yeah.
we are very mission driven, but also for all my investors out there, when you think about when you think about the growth of the industry, and then like I talk a lot about sort of the mainstream nature of it, and how we're really trying to operate as a lifestyle brand that is in the tattoo industry, not as a tattoo
Yeah.
brand and how they've like historically operated. Where we have a lot of partnerships with ink brands and machine brands and some others,
Yeah.
but I'm more excited about the conversations we're having with Nike and with Supreme and
Oh, okay.
the thing we did with Soho House, right? Where we're like really integrating and operating like a mainstream company might, and working with those like I guess companies that are hitting wider audiences. Now, with the wider audiences, that means larger growth of the industry itself, meaning that in the US, almost half the US is tattooed. Like, is that going to be 75% by the time our work is done? But that would require a more
Mm.
inclusive space, right?
Aye.
Because it's like it's not going to be everyone that's cool with, like you said, the sort of like the tough guy like type of
Yeah,
tattooer. If we
exactly.
want to include everyone in, it's gonna have to be a little bit more welcoming, a little bit more
Yeah,
transparent, a little bit more, accessible.
absolutely.
And that's also what we're trying to do.
I think that's already also, I think why it's more possible to do that today is because there's already more than just an ember going on in the tattoo world with this change
Yeah.
already, which is great to see, honestly, because
Mm-hmm.
I at least am very happy to see nowadays compared to when I started out my own interest into the world, not even that far back, but in 2008.
Yeah.
Even back then, it was still, a lot more of the fuck this. We don't need anybody
Yeah.
that's too fun. Like,
Yeah.
don't want to get too into the details of it, but it was still like that.
Yeah.
And it's nice to see how diverse it's becoming right now because I think it was always there. It just was pushed away and squashed and all that stuff.
Yeah. Absolutely. No, I think the timing is really fantastic for this
Yeah.
change. I mean, I can really only speak to sort of the current cultural zeitgeist of the US, but I think around COVID, a lot of sort of different social expectations were pushed
Ah.
out, which I think are fantastic.
Oh,
Another thing that happened
absolutely.
during COVID is that a lot of people went to work from home and a lot
Yeah.
of like professional situations changed. The number one reason why people don't get tattoos is workplace considerations. So
Yeah.
now there's a lot of the number one barrier is now null and void, right? At the same time, previously there was not a ton of online programs for people to get licensed or trained in tattooing. That changed during COVID.
Yeah.
So the timing for this platform, for a platform like Tattd, and for technical innovation and sort of like pushing the barriers and innovation in general, there's never been a better time where people have a little bit of a different vantage point to the tattoo industry post COVID and sort of with this new generation. And it's harder than ever to make a living off of your art as a tattoo artist.
Hmm.
So it's kind of like a double-edged sword right now that Tattd can solve for both things, though.
Yeah, that is a thought I also had that not I mean I do particularly have a weak spot for your app because it's really well put together and I look forward to seeing how it develops. But I have
Right.
noticed with other apps that are similarly sort of going in the right direction that they also sort of push for a change in how it's more, how do I put this? It becomes less risky how you get to earn money as a tattoo artist. Of course, it can never be absolutely
Mm,
100% secure that you're always going to have a paycheck as a tattoo artist. That very much depends on your
mhm.
own marketing as well.
Yeah.
But it's nice to see marketplaces open up that help in this way, like we've seen with other creative
Mm,
lines of work before, that they create these apps or online spaces where they can then more
yeah.
directly market to an audience and also people that may not have otherwise known they exist because they may
Totally.
not as easily get buried in an algorithm on
Yeah.
some of these apps, you know.
Totally. So I can definitely speak to how we're different and how our value is different than some other platforms out there that of course we won't. But a lot of platforms that have been released and that have also been released in the last 10 years that of course, because I'm a psycho, I've like studied and like, have extreme like Excel spreadsheets about like, oh my gosh, like don't even, but a lot of them are maybe routing clients and if so charging
Yeah.
artists and or they're focused on efficiency tools for the artist side and for the calendaring and
Oh,
like the management and all of that, which is of course super super valuable. Whenever I first started Tatted, I mean the first thing I did was have like dozens of interviews with tattoo artists. You know what I
mm.
mean? Because I was like, listen, I want to do
I
this
mean,
with respect to the
that does speak to my
industry.
qualitative heart because I love, I always think that people often go the statistical route way too soon and way
Yeah,
too much. It's
totally.
undervalued how important it is to talk to people, especially people you want to work with or for.
Yeah, no, I did almost a year of research
Oh,
and
wow, awesome.
conversations and focus groups before I even actually started building the product.
Nice.
Which is, from my app development days, like that's like the level of, intention that I want to put into this because I
Yeah.
also don't want to be a founder that, especially as someone that does that, has a background in tech and not necessarily as in tattoo artistry. I'm like, I'm not just going to like make up what I think is best for tattooers. I'm not just going to make up what they need, you know what I mean? And then just go for it and not really listen to them. And the number one thing I kept on hearing is just like, yeah. The appointments, yeah. But I need to make money. I need more clients. You know what I mean? Like I'm sick and tired of like fucking TikTok bullshit. Like, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
they don't need to become marketeers. Like they use a
Yeah.
different side of their brain. And I think they should. They should like I want tattooers to all day just fucking design tattoos and draw and that's all they have to do. Like that's the whole concept. And we can bring them clients and we can bring them well-vetted clients. So the number one value proposition for Tattd, for tattooers,
Yeah.
is getting more clients that wouldn't otherwise be able to easily find you. That's it. We're going to expand to the cool, fun, like, calendaring and, efficiency tools and communication tools and all of that
Uh,
stuff to manage your business. That's cool. But the first thing I want to do is make you money.
yeah. I mean, that is the most American thing I've heard in a while, but it does make sense.
But
Sorry.
as a tattooer, like, what do they
No, it
need?
does.
You know what I
It
mean?
it does absolutely make sense, even in an international context. I couldn't help that just came across my brain, and I couldn't help but say it. But
That's fair.
I mean, it does make sense. I don't want to discount it, but I just could not help but just see stars and stripes banner forming behind you as you said that.
Oh no. Oh god.
No, but what I was
That's
also going to
better.
say is that I mean, it seems that it's also resonating with people because there's always some people, even some people I've had on this podcast. Weirdly enough, I know it's a very tiny podcast for now, but I have had some very interesting people on here, like Oba Jackson and people like that are already following the app. So it must be
Yeah,
resonating with people pretty well.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. We worked with Oba. That's so funny. He's so great. Oh,
Yeah,
I love
he's
him.
absolutely.
Um,
I love that guy. He's fucking awesome.
oh my gosh, I love it. Yeah, it's so great to connect with people that have a sort of a similar vision for the industry and where it should go and what
I
we
mean,
really
and
value.
look
And
at your exhibition you had in New York. You had Yomiko there and other great names. I mean,
yeah,
I mean that it must be cool
yeah.
building something like this and having some of the actually big names actually packing up
Yeah,
on it already. I mean,
that is maybe just like I literally like got chills slightly. It's really a magical part of the process because like I remember the days that I was just like sitting in my Crown Heights apartment in like the back alleys of New York, broke as shit, just like drawing the first like what the app might look like, literally with pen on paper, And so I've been working so much at this for so many years that it's like to finally have people give me a nod of like, yeah, okay, I see what you're doing and I condone it. And, all the hard work is finally like getting some validation. And I'm
yeah.
not just a crazy person in these four walls thinking this is the right thing
I
to
mean,
bet all my cards
from
on,
one crazy person to another, I think we are both still firmly within that category, but it does make more sense.
It's so it's like yeah, and it's only been somewhat recently, to be really honest, in the last like year or so. I've had some early adopters for sure, but I guess as we continue to refine our offering and refine our messaging and continue to create relationships, now we're really getting a lot of traction with some of the biggest names. And I think it's the authenticity of how much we want to serve the tattoo industry. Like we're not I mean, now investors close their ears, but we're not first and foremost profit driven. I really honestly, whenever I came to build Tattd, it's not like cool, like maybe one day I'll be a multimillionaire. Like probably not. But you know what I mean? Like I was really like, I just want to create something
It
awesome for
is,
this
I mean,
industry.
I do like that, and I think it's very much in our generation and people that are younger that create things sometimes that, which is nice to see because America sort of leads the way sometimes. So it's nice to see even American people in our generation that don't always have that billionaire ambition or stuff like that,
Yeah.
but rather want to create, of course, have a comfortable life and earn some money, but will also create something
Mhm.
they stand by and can be proud of and that
Yeah.
can serve other people as well. Which is, I
Yeah.
like that to hear that very much. I mean, it's awesome to hear you talk about that, to be honest.
Yeah, it's a struggle sometimes, man. So, like, as a founder and any other entrepreneur listening will totally resonate.
Mm,
You are forced to build out like how I'm going to reach $1 billion acquisition, which is more or less like pinching every penny possible and like
mm,
maximizing profits and thinking what is the maximum that I can charge these people? What is a million other ways to get money out of them and all this different stuff.
yeah.
At one of our like hardest like money points. This was maybe like 2 years ago or something like that. But I had an investor that was going to write a 6-figure check, and his one demand was that I had to charge tattoo artists. And I was
Oof,
like, and I was like, I was so broke, and I was like,
that's a big one.
and I was like, you know what? No, absolutely not. Like then it just becomes something that I didn't want to work this hard for in the first place. I'm not going to let someone, change my company into something that I don't want to personally work at anymore. That doesn't make sense. So
No,
I
good.
realized quickly that it like wasn't worth it. Because we're super mission driven on the artist side too. My father was an artist and like an illustrator and writer, and so I always saw him struggle with
Mm,
ever sort of making it in that field. He kind of retired as a teacher and always talks about not making. He would print out manuscripts this big and he'd mail them into the random house, and I was like, is that what you do? So I kind of saw, and I always wanted to help him when I was young, and I was like, Dad, like there has to be a different way. I'm pretty that the internet exists now.
yeah,
Do you print out 150 pages and mail them in? Is that what you do? Like I always wanted to like help this like artist brain that is like the most beautiful creative that creates space. When you think about when you walk through the world, and now I'm on my soapbox, so I apologize, but
hey,
when you walk through the world, it's like it's design and it's artistry that
mm,
makes this not like a dreary sort of like communist black and gray level world, right? It's
mm,
architecture. It's like, the color on the walls. It's, functional design. It's
yeah,
however you decorate your apartment. It's all of that. It really actually makes our space something that we want to live in. So the
right,
fact that people aren't always trying to support artists in their artistry and understand that their brain works differently and always just trying to exploit artists of every type, musicians, visual
yeah,
artists, all of the above, I think is absolutely criminal.
Yeah.
And so, that's a lot of what, whenever I thought about building Tattd, it was like, okay, like this is for like, we're not going to do that. We're going to be,
Mm.
the leaders of that conversation, which is why, we talk about blurring the lines in between, highbrow and lowbrow art.
Yeah.
I'm like, I want these people respected as the artists that they are. So it all kind of like loops into the same sort of mission and like DNA of Tattd.
No, but I get it because I always like to do the analogy that sometimes you can see a really beautiful sort of art piece, but if you put it on people's skin, suddenly it's not art anymore to some people. It's
Right.
kind of strange in a way. From a
So
sociological
wild.
perspective, that's really strange because you can choose all sorts of different things as a canvas and it'll still be art. But for some reason, when you put it into the human skin, it's not art anymore. I would argue
So
that it is
wild.
still art, and it also becomes something more than art because it also becomes a form of self-expression, all
Yeah.
that stuff,
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
and yada yada. But it is
I
ludicrous
agree.
to me sometimes. Same with other, like we talked about, like I mentioned graffiti earlier. It's the same thing there. That okay, so because you put it on a concrete wall or a train or something like that, suddenly it's not art. It's
Totally. Totally.
vandalism. That's strange to me. I get if it's tagging and stuff like that. Sure, I get that. That's not
Mhm.
really art.
Mhm.
Same thing with tattoos. I get if it's somebody's kitchen scratching that doesn't really look like anything. I get that's not art. At least not to me. But that's also the subjective part of it. You know, it can
Mhm.
still
No,
be art to
absolutely.
someone else, of course. But
Yeah.
a lot
No,
of the
I always
stuff
use
you
that
see created out
example.
there is objectively fucking art. It's just weird that people
Yes,
don't want to recognize it.
absolutely. Or like you can't just blanket an entire industry as not art at the
Yeah,
very least. You know what I mean?
exactly.
Like if
Yeah,
you want to,
absolutely.
if I draw a stick figure, is that art? You know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
it's just
no,
it's
no, I
conversations
get what
I
you
have.
mean.
Right, like so I understand that like there's a line somewhere, but I think you can't just make an entire industry
Yeah.
not that. And I love your example of the graffiti art because I absolutely think that's just a perfect one-to-one example of how the
Mm.
tattoo world is working, where obviously back in the day in like the 70s and a little bit less in the 80s, but those were criminals, right? Like they were vandals, they weren't respected as proper artists. And now who's the most fucking famous? It's the Basquiat's and the Banksies of the world. That's what
Yeah.
everyone fucking
It's
wants to
also
talk about.
nowadays, I mean, I don't know too much about that world, but at least I've known enough and been to some graffiti festivals in Scotland,
Yeah,
especially, that, nowadays they'll fucking hire people to come all the way from Australia to the UK to make a
yeah,
mural of graffiti art, technically, but it's the art and it's a
totally.
massive mural, in an entire building. And they'll
Yeah,
fly them over and pay them lots of money for it. But and I love that transition because, of course, it's not going to
yeah,
be every artist out there that gets to do that. But it's still nice to see that we're moving towards graffiti art being recognized for what it is, art, and not
absolutely,
just vandalism.
absolutely,
Because man, whenever I see a gray building with just some gray concrete bridge, I fucking wish somebody would pay somebody to paint it over.
totally,
I mean,
totally.
same when I
Well, I'm
same when I
sitting
see naked
here,
skin, and just to let people know, I don't want to force anybody to get tattooed, but
but
bear with me here. When I see naked skin, I always am more closer to thinking that's a bit boring, rather than when I see tattooed skin, I'm like, even if it's shitty, at least somebody did something different. Yeah.
totally, totally. Oh my God, I totally hear you. But like, no, to the graffiti example, like I'm sitting here in Mexico, Diego Rivera, right,
Yeah,
is a
yeah,
wildly famous and respected
yeah.
muralist. Like, when did the fact that it's on a wall go from muralism to graffiti,
It is an
and being
interesting
something that's
distinction
not
because it's very
respected?
much somebody along this chain of social entrepreneurs that decides at some point that, oh, that's high culture, that's low culture, so this is a
Yeah,
mural, that's graffiti, which is strange
yeah,
sometimes, because graffiti, when you
yeah,
look at it objectively, is just a method of painting.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. A method and a medium, 100%. So I
Yeah.
actually, I mean, I'm playing in Mexico right now, but the majority of the time I live in Bushwick, Brooklyn, which
All right.
has the most graffiti
Thank you for
art per square.
clarifying. I must admit, my geography in the US is all right, but not that strong.
So it's so I said this. So Bushwick is specifically, it has the most graffiti art per square foot of anywhere in the world.
All right.
So there's something called the Bushwick Collective. So those walls that like I lived for, gosh, 4 years now, for the last 4 or 5 years, they can only be touched by people that are part of the collective of
All right.
specific graffiti artists. Yeah, so people come in from all over the world, like the most famous graffiti artists. So as I was creating Tattd, I was walking out, and it's literally like you're walking through a museum if you go through Bushwick.
You
It's
you
really
would
cool. They have,
like you would like where I
yeah,
lived a year ago, Glasgow in
yeah.
Scotland.
Oh, I
There's a
bet.
lot of
Okay,
beautiful murals there, a lot of beautiful graffiti there, and they have a graffiti
yeah.
festival every year in May.
Oh, cool.
Yeah,
I love
in this
that.
really cool area of the city where they then paint all sorts of walls and all that stuff and put up temporary
Yeah.
spaces as well. It's great. Not to
Yeah.
digress too far there, but it's pretty good.
No, totally, totally. No, it's funny. The other day I had a like an investor ask me, and he was a nicer one than one that I was
Oh,
annoying. But he was like, talk to me about the largest impact. Like I don't mean, dollars in revenue or like the
the
product. Like
cultural
talk to me
impact.
about talk to me about the impact. And I was like, I want artists to be able to pick up any medium, any brush, any tool, any
Yeah.
whatever, and create art and have that respected as art. Like
Yeah.
that, if we can make that happen, which I know is a bit of a feat, but that would be success in my book.
A bit of a bit.
A little bit ambitious. A little.
I mean, I don't want to
It's
pull the cultural sociology card here, but yeah, no, that might be a bit of a fact for you. I mean,
strictly
it's not
speaking, I
impossible. Nothing
know.
is impossible, especially not when you think about it in a socially constructed kind of way, where it's not given by nature that one thing's out and what is not. Somebody decided that at some point. But that also means that you have to form a new group that will then change that decision
Right, right. I
and
believe in
get
us.
people
I
to
believe in
agree,
us.
which is always the hard
Yeah,
part of doing anything that isn't just forcing anybody to do anything to get them to agree.
right. Yeah, there's that. Yeah, I hear you. What's the vision? What's the vision?
But I mean, talk to me a bit more about, because now I get the business side of the app, the
Mm,
whole transaction side of
yeah.
clients being able to find artists being able to find clientele better. And also,
Hmm.
I know you have ambitions to, streamline the payment options to that as well. But
Hmm.
on the more social and community side of it, it does seem like you also have some ambitions of building a community sort of as well, like an online space through the app as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel as if this community is very disorganized, right?
Mm.
So both on the client side and on the artist side. So,
Ah,
let's say I was like starting my tattoo journey. Where do I get information like kind of what we were talking about before of like, so like, is this too much to ask the tattooer to change this, stencil to X, Y, Z degree or something like that? Everyone always wants feedback on their next tattoo idea, obviously. Um, One time I had a tattoo that was healing pretty gnarly. And I was like,
mm.
is this infected or is it just feeling a little bit extra? Like, you know what
Ah,
I
we've
mean?
all been there.
Right, totally. Because like those are two different things. And I had really known. I was like, I like walked out and I walked into the closest tattoo shop. I was like, can you take a look at this? And they were
Ah,
super nice. But there's really no forum for this type of information and exchange. And
ah,
I guess a lot of tattooed people do have tattooed, friends around them. But at the time that I was creating Tattd, I didn't. I was a weirdo in my little friend group. So, I was like a bit alone in it. And I think there's a lot of power in community and the connectivity of it all, and
mm.
when you think from an artist perspective too, a lot of artists will, especially the super famous ones that are doing like really fantastic things in their specific style and fields, they'll create educational programs. Well, that's because there's
Yeah.
no other, right? And that's like they usually like
That's
advertise
at
on
least quite a
Instagram.
growing industry right now, and I won't give all my honest thoughts on it, but because some people are really selling some great down to earth stuff, and others are
Yeah.
very much promising mountains and
Yep.
building something that looks a bit like a triangle in a certain shape, kind of thing.
That, yep, yep.
Um,
As a ghost,
and
right?
I won't say who or where I think people are doing that, but there are some where I very much think that it should be dialed down a bit and instead just help people.
Yeah,
But
I
I get
totally
what you
hear
mean.
you.
Like that, it's a free fall out there, and you sort of just
Mhm.
happen upon, like the way it looks now. It's almost like you're in this wilderness on social media, and you may happen upon somebody that could teach you at least their
Yep,
version of what they think is the
exactly.
right thing about this one thing. Whereas if
Absolutely.
you put all this together, if you collect it and sort of get somebody, I mean, if you can find experts to do this,
Mhm.
you can sort of sift through it and put out there what
Right,
is valuable, what can be looked at as more reasonable or valid or objectively true, and stuff like
right,
that. For example, what does an
right.
infection look like? That is something you can find actual objective information about. And if you can put that out there in a space where people
Exactly.
can trust the information, then they can really draw benefit of it. You can do the same thing, like you
Absolutely.
can never decide what's art or what's a good tattoo aesthetically. That's for the person and the artist to figure out between
Mm-hmm.
them.
Mm-hmm.
That's a very subjective thing. But you can still also help people, know what's a convention like. Can you go
Right.
to it when you
Right.
have no tattoos? Can you go to it and get, because you
Totally.
get some weird, like I've just interviewed a guy last week that I know and who runs a convention in Scotland. And the amount of times you get asked by people that don't know about conventions, can you get tattooed there? I mean,
Yep.
but that's because even though this information is out there, it's out there on 700 different places that these people may
Yep.
never even find one of them. And
A
then you don't
thousand
get that
percent.
information. So that's what I mean. I don't want to put ideas into your app now, but
No, I
I
love
just
it.
sat here
No,
while we're talking
100%.
about it, thinking from my more socially and culturally minded brain as a
Yeah.
sociologist, thinking about this, that it's also cool when apps like this get a community space. Like, oh, here's a podcast you
Yeah.
might like, or here's a here. Oh, that was might have been
Totally.
my Freudian slip. but, but also like look at like for example, look at this article. For example, some people worry,
Yeah.
can I get tattoos if I want to be a doctor? I, for example, know a
Right.
surgeon in Las Vegas that has face tattoos and everything, and very prominent, and very prominently argues for yes, you can. This shouldn't matter.
Yeah.
So seeing articles from
Right.
these people, or Matt being Shrinkum mates with in Maine, I think it's in Maine Matt lives,
Mm.
but you can also gather these things, like these sort of
Yeah.
showcasing the culture in that way through the app is
Right.
also a great thing. I mean, it might not help
Absolutely.
everybody,
So I
but also
think,
helps you.
yeah. Absolutely. No, 1,000%. All of that. 1,000%. I think they're on it. Like, I totally agree. I think in addition to information exchange, which is what you're kind of talking about, I think there
Yes.
can also be kind of direct transactional value, especially
Oh,
in the tattooer
absolutely.
side. So like studios that are hiring, that's an Instagram post, right? Like
I
um
like.
selling old equipment, selling used
I
fucking
have been thinking
tattoo
about this
beds,
before, that
whatever.
that it's weird that the tattoo world hasn't yet developed its own sort of version of LinkedIn,
I know, totally.
because
It's
it
on our
sort of could
Discord
really
right
use
now.
it. Like it could really use it in a
Yeah.
way.
Absolutely. So it's like, hiring, it's also, for some of the like more advanced tattooers, they're also looking for guest spots. They're looking for international
Oh
guest
yeah,
spots. Some people are looking for other people to come and guest in their shop, right? To like get some interest and like, get some notoriety in the community, whatever else. So we
yeah,
can sort of be this international connector and hub of all of the tattooers and all the sort of different opportunities that they need, right? Or like also to crowdsource the power of the tattooers, right? So
yeah.
we've thought about like convention discounts, ink and machine discounts, like stuff like that. If we are,
But that's what
operating
I'm
as
talking
a
about as well. They can
collective.
also have that community side to it. I mean, at least it sounds like you've already thought this. So I'm probably just preaching to the choir here, so to speak. But
Uh,
it's sort of like where you're going with this also, with how like you can just as easily advertise the studios. You could have somebody
mhm.
advertise a convention or advertise
Yeah,
a new. Somebody might create a new ink manufacturing company that wants to either hire
totally.
people or wants to advertise their new product, and that could also know.
Absolutely.
It's sort of, it's weird to me that there's no space as such online, because let's face it, Instagram isn't that, because it's way too many different
Yeah.
things and all that. And I do like
Yeah.
Instagram. I use it a lot myself. I do also see why the tattoo world fell in love with it, especially when it just came out.
Mhm.
But there's no real
Mhm.
space where people could just go and be like, okay, oh, I need to find a new guy I want to buy ink from. Oh, I find this here.
Right.
Oh, I need to
Right.
find. I want to see if there's a cool convention I could go to somewhere. Oh, I have to go to this website or this website
Yeah.
and do that. Oh, I want to see, can I get a
Right.
guest spot here and there? There's still almost this word of mouth thing to it, and I do know that some in the tattoo world really
Yeah.
love that aspect of it. But the thing is,
Yeah.
as I see, that doesn't go away just because you create an easy alternative. So for people that really like the word of mouth, that's still there. For anybody that would want
Yeah.
an easier solution, that where they have it more organized, that's also there.
Yeah. Absolutely. So, I mean, the social media aspect of things is a complete mess, right?
Hmm.
And the tattoo, and it works in some, in some rights, but I believe the
Uh,
tattoo industry is large and complex enough that it deserves its own platform and space, because
Absolutely, I fully
right?
agree. And I asked some
Yeah.
attempts to do it. Some of the bigger websites have tried some stuff to try and do it, more or less
Mhm.
successful, but I haven't yet to see anybody really doing this
Yeah.
sort of thing you're trying to do, where it can also sort of become this, well, yeah, sort of LinkedIn kind of thing, almost.
Yeah. So there's a few different pieces of the vision of Tattd, which again is pretty ambitious, but here we are. Um,
Well,
so it's a few different platforms, right? So it's the connective booking platform,
yes.
for artists to get new clients, for clients to find the perfect artist for them.
Hi.
It's the efficiency tools for the artists, right? Which
Mm.
is what we're building right now, which is not only like here's an easier way to organize your appointments and your clients, but also
Oh,
stuff
right.
like,
Yeah.
there's that, but it's also stuff like your hourly rate is $25 less than everyone in your zip code for your amount of years experience.
Oh, right.
Or
Yeah.
right, like actually helping them run their business in a way that's like a little bit more lucrative for them. Or you have $5,000 booked this month, but next month you only have 3. You got to push for next month's bookings or something like that. Or every month you spend X amount in ink or machines, so ergo you're going to net this in your revenue for the month,
All
so that
right. So
I'm
some
able to
nice
make rent on
assisting
that.
tools in that way. Yeah.
Absolutely. So it's that platform. It's the community platform, both for the clients and the artist side, where they can get resources, education, everything they benefit from connecting to other artists, right? That's one piece of things. And then it's the studio facing platform also for a
Nice.
much more advanced experience for the studio owner to manage all their employees, manage all of the client databases, manage their inventory, all of the above, their accounting, like all of that. So this is actually like a mammoth product that we kind of
I mean,
started to
it is
strategize.
indeed ambitious, very much so ambitious. But I think there's a real like skeleton to it, so to speak. As
Yeah,
I don't know if that's actually just a Danish expression, but I've translated that.
totally.
But there's some substance to it. Like it's not just
Yeah.
floating out there these 3 separate things, and then you need to connect them now. There seems to already be some tether between them.
Absolutely.
At least from
Absolutely. I
where
think
I'm
there's
sitting
value in it
listening to
being
it.
one,
Yeah.
like I think some people have created those things in isolation. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like either the community part or maybe the studio software part or whatever it is, right? Or
Aye.
maybe a little bit on the discovery thing, still not with like a powerful search. But I think there's value in the aggregation of all of that
I
data,
think so
right?
too.
And in the community.
People like to have stuff collected. A lot of people are getting tired of having too many different apps. So it's always a good idea to
Totally.
consolidate things, I think.
Exactly.
That could
100%. So
also
that's
just
sort
be
of
my age
where
talking, where because
flows.
I'm pushing mid-30s now, but
No, don't worry, don't worry. No, but that's the whole vision to it. And I think that's a big piece of differentiation because if you create each of those different solutions in isolation, all the
yeah.
rest are still a mess. You know what I mean? So like, let's say we stopped at the product that we have now. Well, once you get a client on Tattd, where do you enter it in for your studio? You know what I mean? Like how do you pay out the studio owner, whatever percentage, like all of
Yeah.
that type of stuff. Like we're building those streamlined things so that, the minute that you book a client on the Tattd app, that it shows up in the artist software, it shows up in the
Yeah.
studio owner software, all
That's
the
good.
payments are flowing, and there's not a single touch of a manual, process that
That's
anyone
actually
has to do. Think
streamlining
about
a
that
lot of
work.
different professions you find in a modern studio nowadays. That makes it easy for the shop
Mhm.
manager, the tattoo artist, all those positions.
Totally.
If you don't have a streamline like that, that's pretty cool.
Exactly. Look out for that by end of year.
I mean, I will. I mean, I don't know if I'm gonna use it, but I fucking look forward to seeing what it develops into, man.
Totally.
I mean,
We'll have another
absolutely.
chat and I'll talk about it.
Oh, no, you'll invite me on something then. Then we'll talk about.
Got you. I love it.
But speaking of that, now you almost snuck us into the end there actually without me having to do it. But actually, I hesitate to do my usual ending on a lighter note because even though it's been really fascinating and in-depth this discussion, it's been quite lighthearted actually to some extent. But on a sillier note, we could say, I'm curious to know you yourself. I mean, I hesitate to call you heavily tattooed. You call you heavily tattooed. We can always discuss that. But what are your next tattoo plans yourself? Do you have anything
Oh
you
my
want to
gosh.
get done?
Absolutely. There is a tattooer out of LA, but he's South Korean, named
All right.
8P. I need to contact him. We actually
I've heard of
helped him get
him.
his visa. Yeah, he's amazing. He's amazing.
Yeah.
But it's an interesting intersection of abstract and realism and like
Yeah.
micro realism type of things that is coming kind of, it's getting more popularity, but he kills it. It's super unique. It's amazing. I'm so excited for that one. I have some lettering I want to get on the knuckles. I
Ooh.
have another abstract piece that I did Brian Sold that I want on the side. Yeah,
You weren't kidding
I'll make
about
sure
a
to give
lot
you
of
other hints.
burning ideas. You were
Oh,
not.
yeah, absolutely, 1,000%. I have so many, and they're all in different geographies. So
Oh no, I know the pain of that. I've not only do I have a money problem when it comes to getting tattoos at the moment, but also have some of the artists I know, some of in Scotland, another one's in Australia. There's a
yeah,
big problem though. somewhere in Ireland.
Totally.
I think one is in the US as well, so it's all over the place.
Then you have to come to the US.
Oh, I mean, I already have to do that. I know far too many people in the States now. Like, I'll happily admit to any haters out there, I was one of those Europeans that didn't always think I was ever gonna go to the US. Didn't have to be, but I've known too many fucking Yankees now to not go there.
Here's one more. Let's do
At
it.
one point, I do have to take like almost a victory lap if I start having some sort of success and visit people
I
over
love
there.
it.
But we'll see.
I
I
love
mean,
it.
but I do like that
Okay.
idea. I think I'll for once share mine as well. Like if I get lucky, I do want to fill out my right arm at least because I'm one of those people that like a good dense filled out sleeve. And this one has some
Mm-hmm.
glaring gaps right now.
Oh,
And both of them on the
ew.
elbows. So that's great. Get both sides of that beaten up.
Ooh, that would be, yeah, that would be painful but cool.
It's,
Yeah, I
it's all
love
right. I've
it.
gotten it elbow tattooed before. Weirdly
Okay,
for
so
me, worse here than there.
Ooh, really? Okay,
That was
okay. My
strange. That was
hand was
strange.
probably my worst,
Oh,
I would
no,
say.
no.
Eh,
You should see my talk with Matt, the ink shrink, who got his palms done. I think
yeah,
this year, last year, he got them done, and he said that's actually one of the few times he really like almost had to tab out.
it's rough. It's rough. Luckily,
I
mine
heard
was
so, yeah.
quick, so it was like
Oh
20 minutes. So
yeah.
like you could breathe through 20. But if it was more complex than this, then it was going to be like an hour. I don't know if I could have done it. It was crazy.
That's how I felt
It
with
was
my
crazy.
chest. I could only sit
Oh,
the longest I ever sat on my chest was 3.5 hours. My ribs, I can at most back in the day, and I was very young when I got my ribs done. I was 20 when I got my first rib tattoo done.
okay.
And I could
Okay.
sit 2.5 hours at a time.
Ooh,
I was
pretty
it.
good though. It's pretty
Yeah, it still
good.
took 13 hours to finish that tattoo. So
Wow. God bless.
yeah, my first new
Yeah.
school piece.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. That's detailed. I hear you. I love
Just uh, but man, I always
it.
don't want to end this. It's really a delightful interview. I really enjoyed this today. Even though there's been
Yeah,
a lot
me
of app talk
too.
and I've really tried to keep up. But
I did my best to
no,
like
I'm
refrain.
I'm joking. I'll say you're very good at explaining it, and I did want to have an episode of this exactly for the reasons you also might want to create the app. That is quite big, and this sort of the way things are heading right now in the
Yeah,
digitalization of the tattoo world, so to speak. So
it
I
is.
mean, no better time to talk about it really. But
Hell
we are sort of at the end because else we will start another episode, and I know you also do want to
yeah.
enjoy your time in Mexico City at some time
Yeah,
today. So
yeah.
first of all, thank you so much for coming on here. It's been an
Yeah.
absolute pleasure to have you on. And I mean, we've already talked about Tattd, and that will be linked wherever I can put it the episode comes out. But do you have anything else you want to plug?
I would look out for us in New York and LA specifically. We're doing a ton of different pop-up events, flash
All right.
tattooing, events at Soho House, the sort of like the thing that we did in New York recently that Inked
All
Mag
right.
covered, where we're putting, tattoo artists' paintings next to their tattoo art as a gallery show. So those communities, take a look, follow our Instagram, and come out and meet us in person. I'm always there.
I mean, I wish I could. Maybe someday.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I'll let you know.
But once again, Laura, thank you so much. And to
Thank
anybody
you.
listening in or watching, we'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Appreciate you.
Hello, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this episode with Laura Schaack. Always interesting to meet new people and see new parts of what the industry is becoming now in this very digitalized world. I know we ended up talking a little about Laura's app, Tattd, and it seems like one of the greater ones out there. Highly recommend checking it out. It's not a sales pitch for this app at all. This episode, I hope nobody takes it that way. But it's interesting to talk to her about the app to sort of give a look into what the space around tattooing is developing like. And by that I mean it is a more digitalized industry by now, and it's becoming more digital as the years move on. And apps are becoming more prolific in the tattoo world. So it's interesting to see what they're doing, how they differ from one another, and what some of the better ones, for example, like Tattd, are doing to be better and develop the industry and the culture and such around them, and do more to create community in such a way. Because it's interesting that the tattoo world is a massive industry, massive culture, yet there's no LinkedIn, for example, so to speak, within the tattoo world, as me and Laura kept talking about.
So I hope you take from it a nice, interesting look into that sort of space within the tattoo world and industry. And next time we're going to be talking about something very different. I'm going to be talking to the awesome artist Katie Mizuno, well known for her abstract black work and geometrical tattoos. And we're going to be talking about these types of tattoos and what makes black work a lot more complex and a lot more interesting than what some people may give it credit for. And I really hope you're going to enjoy that episode as well. I at least know I had a fantastic time talking with Katie about this, and she has a lot of interesting stuff to say on the topic.